Hello everyone. This is the introduction to the video really that I've been looking forward to sharing with you. I've referenced it in some of the notes and other videos that we have coming out of our work for the Altadena Fire Project and the aid that many of you are involved with there. This is a wonderful couple that we met as a result of the fires, but the story has nothing to do with Altadena and the fires. It simply is a story of loss and grief and overcoming. And with that said, I was going to ask if you know of any others that have endured loss like we do. We know several families that have endured the loss of their children over the years, and they've shared those stories. And I would like to visit with anyone that you know that has encountered or experienced that kind of tragedy in their life. Whether or not they've overcome the situation, I don't know that you ever overcome it. It's just stays with you forever. But anyway, so go to the Shepherd's Heart website that you have links to from our correspondence. And if you want to share names or introduce others to us that have gone through these tough times, there's a project that I'm working on that I think I could use more help on that. Anyway, enjoy this. It's just a great story and comes from great people.
Okay, so asking Ursula, not sure details, but she's been through, her and Richard here have been through some heartache and some of life's toughest challenges, and yet the church has been part of the redemption and the healing piece of your life. So maybe just if you guys could share a little bit about what the church meant to you, because for the people that watch this that don't understand church or don't understand the depth of the community and the spiritual fiber that we not only we get from God but from each other, how He weaves us together as as the church community. This is a great story.
Okay, well, I'll say really quickly, actually. So our son his name was Christopher Richard Walker, and he was 26 years old. And Christopher, I have to tell the truth, was a little bit wayward at first from the time he was a teenager, his teenage days. But, as some kids will do, they grow up. And as the Bible tells us, when I was a child, I thought as a child, but as I became a man, as I grew up, then I became more mature, just paraphrasing that. And that's what happened. So he became really mature and he became a really good kid. He became a responsible adult. So he went to work with me every day. He didn't work with me, but he worked 3 blocks from where I worked, and I worked in downtown LA. So he would drive his car to our house about before 6 o'clock every morning, and he would leave his car so he could carpool with us, and he would drive with me, and we'd sit and talk and chat about whatever. We would drive from Altadena, our home, to downtown LA, and I would drop him off at his job. So one day he called, he says, Mom, and he would ride home with me. He called and says, Mom, I'm not going to ride home with you today because they let us off early because he was a salesperson. He said, we made a lot of sales and they're giving us like a gift of half a day off. So I says, okay, how you going to get home? I'm going to catch the train, okay? So that was around 1 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, someone called and told me he had been killed. I was still at work. So I says, okay, well, where is he? And they told me that he was at Fair Oaks Burger, which is right up the street, on the same street that's been burned out, and actually it's still standing. And I said, okay, I'll go see. And so I didn't call my husband because he was at home, and I was afraid if I called him that it would be too hard for me to drive home because I had to drive home from downtown LA to Altadena. So I didn't call him, but he, I think, called me, and somehow we connected, and someone came to the house and had told him. So anyways, we both knew, and so we got there, and so my son was, in fact, he had died, he perished. So that being said, we were devastated, and I grew up in the church. My dad was a minister. Like I said, he was a friend of Pastor Lewis's father, and we used to travel all across the country. We had a tent, we had an Airstream trailer, all that kind of stuff. I sang, my brother played the organ, it was a whole little family thing. My mother played the piano. It was like, we were called Family Team Crusades, and we traveled all across to Illinois, to Michigan, whatever. In the summertime, we would take the tent in the Airstream trailer and we'd go. And so we were used to that. So I was used to revival. I was used to being in service. I was used to being in church every Sunday. And I've sang since I was, I don't know, 5 years old. I can't remember the first time I sang. So I was used to it, and so I missed going to church, but we kind of stopped because we were discouraged, and we were basically upset.
Yeah, right.
And we didn't really understand why this would happen to us of all people. I mean, his grandfather's a minister, and his father is my husband's a minister, and his uncle's they're like, what is this? So we were upset, so we kind of stayed home for a minute. And so, but my mother was 90 years old at the time, and she didn't want to stay home, and she didn't really understand all that. I mean, she's a little bit dementia and whatever. And she's like, when are we going to church? So I told my husband I didn't want to go back to our old church because there were a lot of people that knew my son, and it just felt too sad. And so I wanted to find a different church. And so I started visiting churches. I visited another church, and then I told my husband I was going to visit. By then I'd run into Pastor John, actually by mistake. I was going to visit my mother in the senior citizens home. And Pastor Jonathan was coming up behind me to visit. He was, yes, that
was a senior citizen
that lived in the same place.
He was dropping someone off.
Yes, and that's how we saw it. And he says, Ursula Black? And I said, yeah, and then I said, oh, and we recognized, and I remember we embraced. He said, well, how you doing? He had a big smile. And I remember I said, I'm not doing that good. And he says, why? And I said, well, my son just got killed a couple of days ago. He says, oh my goodness. He said, I was telling my wife that I hope it wasn't somebody we knew that was just killed because the hamburger stand was right up the street. He said, I was hoping it wasn't somebody we knew. I said, well, it was my son. And so he says, well, when is the funeral? Tell me. I want to be with you guys. I want to be there for you. And I said, it's out at Paznaz. And I didn't think he even knew what that was, right? And he said, Paznaz? I said, yeah. He said, that's our sister church. I said, how? Really? And he said, yeah. He says, I know all about Paznaz. I go, oh, okay.
And Paznaz stands for?
This church, Pasadena Church of the Nazarene.
Yeah.
Yep. And so right where we are, actually on the grounds of
Paznaz. And what year was this?
It's 2014.
Okay.
He was killed in October, the day before.
Okay.
The day before Halloween, which
a little
is
more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, I definitely hate Halloween now, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he says, yeah, Paznaz. And the thing about it is, we had, come to Paznaz to ask them would they let us use the church. We didn't know anybody here. And we came to the office and told them our story, the story I just told you, about our son was a good boy, and he was wrong place, wrong time, and he was killed. And they allowed us to come in, and we were able to use the facility here, and the church was full. And I think it seats around 2,000 people, I think.
Yeah, big auditorium.
The church was full. And we knew we needed a large place, and it was absolutely full. So anyways, they were very kind to us. We were very appreciative. So and he was there. Pastor Jonathan was there. And my husband, Richard, and Pastor Jonathan didn't know one another or anything like that, but he embraced him. And then I was telling my husband, I'm going to church. I'm going to visit. I'm going to take my mom. He says, okay, well, you go right on ahead. And he said, I'm going to watch football. So then I'll let you tell what happened with you.
That sounds about right.
And you can go to Pastor, talk about Pastor.
Yeah, I was pretty well done with church, and because the people that called me friend and brother, they knew what happened, and they knew who did it. And it was like, do you love me or not? And I was just devastated. And so the person that came and told me knocked on the door, said, man, your son's just been shot. I said, well, is it bad? Yeah.
It's real bad.
And he closed the door and left. And I'm like, well, you don't care about if I'm on, why would you leave like that? So that, like, another church member.
Pastor, actually.
A pastor, yeah. And I'm like, oh, man. So I was pretty well done with church. And the day of the funeral, Pastor Jonathan was here, and he was the only pastor that hugged me.
Wow.
The only one of all those ministers that were there. So that kind of stuck with me. But to go back a little bit further about Christopher, I actually delivered him at home.
Yeah, you did.
I actually delivered him. So
by accident, not on purpose. We weren't trying to do that.
But I delivered him though.
Yeah,
so my name is on his birth certificate.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I thank God for that. I was the first one to ever lay hands on him and touch him and all of that.
That's great.
So
And
then
so, go ahead.
you got to the church. You stopped. You weren't coming to church, and finally you visited, and you sat way in the back.
Yeah.
And then you finally came a little closer.
And where were you? Sitting in the front?
Absolutely,
Sitting
with
in
my
the
mother.
Were you?
I always
You
sit in the
weren't
front.
singing in the worship yet.
No, but I was sitting with my mom because I was still new.
Yep.
And I was enjoying it. And then my mother, though, who's very outspoken, you need to have him preach. He's a great preacher. And so, and he started inching up closer and closer and closer. And I guess finally Pastor Lewis had to listen to my poor mother because she was probably getting on his nerves.
Oh, that's too much.
And so then, and also Pastor Lewis, what did he preach that really encouraged you?
The seed is not dead.
Oh, wow.
That was his message that he
That was a message.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. He said
Tailor-made.
Yeah, he said the seed is not dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you came once, and then you came again.
Came again.
And again, and it became home.
It became home, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And I remember one Sunday morning, he held my hand. He says, I think we should join here. And I said, okay. And that was it. And I can't quite remember what Sunday that was.
I don't know.
But it was in 2016. I know
Yeah.
that.
That is a great story.
And we had the highest service, I wanted to say, I'm sorry, that I don't ever remember having, I think. It was so jubilistic. And it was and Pastor preached such a great message this past Sunday. And it's really...
So you're saying just this past Sunday?
Yeah.
We had such a high service, and he preached such a great message about the shepherd. And it was just so encouraging. Everyone was really excited about the service. It was such a good, it was just like you could really feel the Spirit and God's presence in there. And it was so weird that, man, we didn't know that was going to be the last service in that building.
Right.
So that was really something too.
2 or 3 days later, it burnt down. 3 days, I guess, in the morning.
3 days later, yeah.
Wednesday morning, early.
Yeah, early Wednesday morning, yeah.
Wow. Well, that is those are stories. So as I listen to these stories of Alice, your house burning down, and it'd be easy to ask, okay, God, why, right? And then certainly with your son, you guys, as I sit here, I am thinking of others that we know that have lost their children. And I'm thinking that one of these days we'll all get together and maybe put if you're up for it, because I know one of these other ladies would definitely, and I've asked her to share her story before. Her daughter killed in an automobile accident, but just me hearing your story helps me, and I don't know how comfortable you are telling that publicly, but
we have told our story many times. We've told it to police officers. We've been invited to churches to tell our story, and I mean, it's a lot. I initially had said, and I actually started a book. I've never finished it, of course, but it was called. Now I forgot what it was. It was From Cradle to Crypt. From Cradle to Crypt, and I told Christopher before he passed, because of course we didn't know this was going to happen. But I said to him, I said, I'm writing a book about you, about your life. And he said, you are, Mom? And he would always laugh at me. I said, yes, I am. And I said, and you're going to finish the last chapter. I told him that, and I remember saying it. And he says, okay, Mom. He said, I could do that. I said, I know you can, because by then he was working every day. He was he was a good father. He was really turning himself around, and he was doing the right thing. He was on the right track. And he had told me, he said, Mom, I've been praying, and he was really doing the right thing. So I was really proud of him. I said, you're going to write the last chapter. And so he says, okay. And so I said, I tell you what, I said, I know you're probably not going to take time and write anything for me right now. And I was really into it. I was so serious about the book. I said, I tell you what, if you start talking, he was on the phone because at that time he lived in Arizona. He hadn't moved back here yet. I said, if you start talking on the phone, I'll type it. And I said, I promise you, I won't change a word. I said, I'm going to put it in your words. I won't make up my own. He says, okay, Mom. So he typed, or I typed, as he was talking. And I think it's about 3 pages, maybe?
It's about 3 pages,
I think it's about 3 pages. I have it at home. It's typewritten. And he talks about how he turned his life around.
Oh, goodness.
He talks about how proud he was of himself and how he was working. He talked about the streets and how he had been in trouble and how he thought he would not live to be 20. And at that time, I think he was about 23, and he was killed at 26. And so I always thought if I ever finished the story, I would make that the last chapter.
That's beautiful.
From
And
cradle to grave.
Richard, I love the story of how God patiently just brought you home and back into
For the last few.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was really done. I said, God, I've done all this for you. You're going to allow this to happen?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? And I sat down and wrote a letter, told God all about it. I said, you had the power and the ability to raise your son, but I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Not equal footing.
I said, that's not fair.
Yeah. My goodness. So that was a blend of lack of understanding and anger, just all mixed together.
All mixed together, yeah.
Yeah. And then when did you just get released and get victory over that?
When I forgave the perpetrator.
Interesting. Wow.
We were at I think it was a Women's Day service at another church.
We went with Fountain of Life.
At
It was a
the
fellowship.
church. What was that church called? Down on Fair Oaks?
Mother Griffin's church?
Mother Griffin's church. And I went up to the evangelist and told her, and I said, I want to forgive the perpetrator.
And that was just like probably a flood washing over you.
It was, yeah.
To shake that. Now, was the perpetrator there when you did
We
this?
don't
or
actually know
you don't
for
know?
sure by
Okay.
No, for sure, but I've heard that
We've
who
been
it
told,
was, and
Mhm.
you know.
Small enough community where everybody
Yeah.
kind of knows what's
Yeah.
going on.
But
and
there
they've
were
never been arrested for it.
there were like 15 witnesses, and none of them, you know.
Ah. Well, I'll tell you what. When those fires went off and the houses burned down, I thought we should try to do something. And I know enough folks, to,
Okay.
and not people with a lot of money, just regular folks that will give into the right, good hearts will give into the right ministry. That's right. And so, of course, and we have this little platform with Shepherd's Heart where we can tell this story. And so this has been a interesting week, emotional, because when there's that kind of loss and tragedy, and interviewing Alice just now and Pastor Garcia and his wife Jenny this morning are in the exact same situation, and sitting there in clothes that are somebody else's. Jenny borrowed clothes to go to church today.
Oh my goodness.
But if for no other reason, for me to videotape this story and to hear this story of you guys and Christopher, right?
Yeah.
I'm mostly grateful for that.
Oh.
That is powerful.
Yes.
Because that's life. That's
Yeah.
hardship and lack of understanding, and you need God's grace, and we just don't get it, God, and it doesn't seem equitable, and yet He understands what not being equitable is all about.
Yeah.
So that was worth me driving over here today and the other day. And so
God
we
bless you.
appreciate you guys, and I'm going to help carry that on. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pastor Jonathan.
Thank you,
We
sir.
want to thank you as well.
Alice, you're the best.
Well, I'm the last of 6. All my siblings are gone.
Oh,
And so I don't have any sister or brother to lean on. So I only have my niece, who is my oldest daughter. I'm my oldest sister's daughter. So, yeah,
and what year were you born? I'm thinking we're close together in age.
53.
53. Yep. So I'm 54. Yep. Yep. So you got me a little bit, but not by much. But we love you guys. We're going to tell your story, and we're going to, hey, anybody listening to this, we need your help. We can do good things if we bind ourselves together, listen closely, and follow the need. And I know so many that will get this video will follow through. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
your kindness. God
Thank you
bless
so much.
Wow. That story wipes me out each time I hear it. Richard and Ursula, thank you for sharing that and allowing us to participate. somewhat in your grief, and at the same time honoring and mourning with you your son Christopher. He was a special human being, and thank you for sending his picture along. And for those that were wondering about the family group shot with Santa Claus, the young lady in the bright red dress is Christopher's daughter. And of course, Richard and Ursula are there with their grandson. So it's just a great picture, a picture of a legacy. But thanks, you guys, Richard and Ursula, for sharing that with us, and we appreciate it so much. Yeah, it's a great story of dealing with grief and unanswered questions, and how you've managed to persevere. So thank you for that, and we'll continue to tell your story.